Good morning. How are you today? It is a Thursday. Yes, and I know Thursdays is Dr. Nellie Kangwa, who normally is the one that takes up this slot and runs with this, but she is very far away. She's in Nigeria, and there in Nigeria, she is running a boot camp and some training. You know how Doc is. And so, on account of that, she is just not going to be available to run her usual slot. So like we always do here in our platform, being the leaders that we are always ready and on standby to jump on board and do what we ought to do for the purposes of running our section. So today, being a Thursday, I'm here to present on her behalf, and I'll be doing her slot of prosperity for your soul. So for those of you joining us today, Thursdays is Dr. Nellie running with Prosperity for Your Soul, and the rest of the days it's ourselves. So Monday it's myself, yours truly, and I run Unleashing Your Destiny, where we're looking at all topics relating to destiny, future, and peak performance. On Tuesdays it's Aunt Sylvia. She runs with Mindset Change Program, and she has great insight and input in terms of helping you change your thinking in order to transform into who you ought to be, rather than conform to your environment and to your cultural background. On Wednesday, we have our open market. So Wednesdays normally are relating to obviously different aspects of the market. We also have individual presentations from different organizations and paying customers, as well as our own services that we run. And then on Thursdays, we have this one, Prosperity for Your Soul with Dr. Nellie, and that runs every Thursday, and we're very proud to be part of that. And this Thursday, I am standing in for her. And then on Friday, we have Doc Jackie with health tips, and she comes through and teaches all things relating to health and wellness. She's very, very gifted in that space, and that's her space. And so today, I, Rev Walter, I'm standing in for Doc, and I am tackling the topic you now see on your screen, which is life leadership snippets, dispelling common misconceptions. This is all part of Prosperity for Your Soul, and I'm dealing specifically with the body and world and marketplace type of topic. This is leadership, and when we talk about leadership, there are so many things people have, there are so many things people think of when it comes to their understanding of leadership. And so in this case today, I want to just go through a topic. I did this some months back, maybe almost a year ago, on leadership. Very, very insightful. And I know for a fact that a lot of people were able to benefit immensely from this topic. So today, over the weekend, I had a very profound business and strategic strategy planning review with one of the leading institutions in the country. Very, very insightful. And in that session, we also looked at leadership. So this is me going back to my notes and just kind of, doing a run up just to remind, and of course, also to be of benefit to those that join us on these calls. And so today, I want to just run through what I call the dispelling common misconceptions. So I'm going to start with the first four big misconceptions. Then from there, we're going to build ourselves into the other, leadership topics as well, besides these common misconceptions. So number one, a lot of people believe, in fact, this has been taught right from the time of the Romans, because leadership really began to take shape and form the thinking that forms today's, how can I put it, manuals and training on leadership. They really began in Rome. They kind of started from Greece, and Greece and Rome had a very strong relationship in terms of the culture and thinking. And so you have what we call the Greco-Roman influence in terms of thinking, in terms of direction, in terms of all things relating to progress and success. And so leadership is no exception. Remember, the Greeks had a lot of philosophers like Socrates and Plato and all these guys. You find that they shape the thinking of the day. And you notice that even in the Bible, Paul highlights that, because Paul mentions that in those days, there's this whole thing about leadership and thinking and philosophy. And so people would meet and just talk about all these things. And so the first concept of leadership began there. And to be honest, it took centuries, not even decades, centuries to get or dispel some of these myths I'm going to look at. So there are 4 myths that I want to quickly look at, and then we're going to cover some other common misconceptions. So for the sake of those of you joining us this morning, there will be quite a bit to take down. Remember that there's power in writing, there's power in taking note. One of the things I noticed that's very common with Prosperity for Your Soul is asking people to just kind of react. So I want to see those reactions, I want to see those fires, I want to see those, you know, emojis, just letting us know that you're here and you're with us. So let's quickly look into those 4. So the 4 common misconceptions, in Zambia, in the world, which come from the past and are now common here. And by the way, let me acknowledge the presence of Dr. Jacqueline Mohair. Glad to see you today here on the call. Very honored to have met you when you came through for the leadership, for the training, for the event that Dr. Nellie had put together on her birthday. So glad to see you as part of our people joining us this morning. Very honored. Now, anyway, let's go on. So like I was saying, there are 4 common misconceptions. The Greeks really kind of began highlighting this in their time, and it's come today. So number 1, so I'm going to just name them, and then I'll kind of go into breaking them down. So number 1, leadership is a product of natural endowment. Very, very interesting concept there. Number 2, leadership is a product of birth traits. So there's going to be some traits, and that's what determines. I'll break this down. Number 3, leadership is a product of providence, that some people are destined to lead. And then number 4, leadership is a product of charismatic personality. So now let's begin to break those down. Now I have mentioned that these are misconceptions. What does that mean? That means they're not correct. They sound correct, they are pushed as correct, but they are not correct. So number 1, leadership is a product of natural endowment. There's this belief that, you know, the idea of being born into leadership, you know, the whole idea behind the regal bloodline thing, the kings and chiefs and emperors, that is by birth. So there's this belief from the past that it had to be by birth. Now I do realize there's still blue bloods around us. There's people that are born into privilege. For example, King William, well, soon to be King William, so Prince William, King Charles, Prince Harry, these guys are born into privilege. It's not something you strive to become. You're just born in that, and all they do is groom you and prepare you, but you're born in it. So there's a whole belief out there that, you know, leadership is by natural endowment. You're born into it, you're a leader, end of story. And it's so interesting because we know historically that there were some people that certainly should never have become leaders, even though they were born into it. We know King George VI, if I'm not wrong, was actually mad, stark, raving mad as a king, but because he was bloodline, he was the next in line, he had to be there, he had to rule. It was crazy, man. But this is things that have happened historically. There are quite a number of examples where people had to be put there, but definitely everybody saw that the man is local bonkers. But hey, you know, that's the thing. They're naturally endowed. So that thing is extremely untrue, and very big misconception. Number 2, birth traits. Now, this birth traits thing is where they actually believe that leaders had a certain look. Now, this thing really worked very badly, even historically, because, for example, the idea of white supremacy is born of this. So there's this belief that, you know, fair-skinned, white, chiseled face, square jaw, small nose, you know, there's a certain look that they said this is a regal look. So all the kings and queens had to look a certain way. And so leaders as well were kind of picked on that. If they're bigger, taller, muscular, you know, that played a role in them being picked as leaders. So that kind of became a thing. It became a way in which people were picked as leaders. And again, natural looks is so untrue, because all we need to do is look in history. You know, that's what I love about history. I'm a student of history. I know for a fact that there are so many examples in history of people that did not look like leaders. 2 great examples that come to mind: Attila the Hun. Attila was a dwarf. It was a dwarf, was a short guy. But hey, I mean, Attila the Hun shook Europe in that time. If you talk about Napoleon Bonaparte, he was a short, squidgy, fat guy. You know, it doesn't look quite the leader, because, you know, there's that look. If you watch the movies, you know, the leader would look like The Rock, you know what I mean? That's how they're supposed to, Dwayne Johnson, The Rock, that's a leader, like, wow. You know, but truth be told, and ironically, if you study your Bible, you realize that even Saul, King Saul, was actually picked on that account, that he had the look, he had the demeanor that made for what a leader should look like. So it's very interesting that this natural these birth traits were a big deal, because even when you look at the story of our own kings and chiefs here in Africa, the beginning was kind of like that as well. Those who commenced and began many of the movements and tribes were really of that stock as well. So they always pick the bigger, more, endowed looking person with the great birth traits, and then that's what became the leaders. And you notice again, like I keep saying, this actually is behind white supremacy. We know here in Africa that leadership and therefore responsibility was classed according to race. And so at the top of the chain, especially with the British, but this is true also with the Belgians, you had the whites, and then after the whites, you had the Indians. And then after Indians, or Asians as you call them, then the next class was what they call the half castes, or the coloreds. Here in Africa, we call them coloreds, which is basically half caste, so meaning half white, half black, or half white, half Indian. So those now were the coloreds, and then at the bottom were the blacks. And this thing isn't just in what you call it. It isn't just in British-speaking Africa. In Belgian-speaking Africa, we had a similar situation. The story of Rwanda. A lot of people don't know that Rwanda and Burundi, where did that come from? That was the same story. When the Belgians went there, they literally went to the people of the same tribe and decided to separate them by look. So they had little measures. The nose had to be a certain width, the lips had to be a certain thickness, and the face had to be a certain way, and so and they had to have a certain shade of skin as well. And that's how they basically separated, because there were basically three types of people. You had the Hutus, you had the Tutsis, you had the Twa. And so the Twas and the Tutsis, well, the Twas pretty much disappeared, but the Hutus were the more squadgy looking guys, and so they put them on the lower caste, and then the Tutsis were given the superior position, so they got better education, they got better jobs, they got better everything. So they were kind of given a head start in terms of their socio-economic status, and that unfortunately, began the distrust and mistrust and the whole problem, which later built into total resentment. So there was resentment between those classes. And we know that literally from independence, a lot of people just don't know this, but from independence, this strife continued between the Hutus and Tutsis, which was started by the Belgians. So there's your source. And that's because of this thing about birth traits. And then the third one is leadership is a product of providence, that some people are destined to lead. Now, I agree to some extent that there are certain events that happen which you just have to admit are providential. You just have to admit that, okay, that is beyond anything natural. That is beyond anything you can plan. This is just something that has happened. That I admit, that I agree. That is something that's amazing, and it happens on a regular basis on a lot of instances. But that being said, it doesn't take away the fact that when you look at all things and take all things equally, that there is a difference, between this idea of being destined to lead and the reality that comes with people who push and exert themselves. We know that a lot of times when it comes to success of, leadership and business and politics, there's a lot of machinations that are taken on by people, and they are literally able to whirl themselves into those places of success. And so on that account alone, it proves very powerfully that the idea that leadership is destined is a debatable issue. We've seen that there are people who've been able to do it without necessarily being destined. Now, okay, if you say that this person's ability to to be so, what's the word, driven towards leadership. If we could say that that's maybe a factor of destiny, then maybe. But it's a highly debatable issue. Okay, it's not that every one of these individuals is destined to lead. We know for a fact that some people are just brilliant at being able to put themselves at the right place at the right time and manipulating events in order to put in place those that they want. And that's why the idea of destined to lead is also not true. It's a misconception. Number 4. Leadership is a product of charismatic personality. Now that one, I mean, yes, a lot of people think that no, you need somebody who's able to talk well, who's articulate. But you know, if you want to look at history for proof, just follow the story of Moses. Moses stammered. Moses was heavy of tongue. It's so difficult to believe that, but that's what the Bible says, that he couldn't speak well. And when God was commissioning him to go to Egypt, guess what? He actually gave that excuse. He says, but Lord, I can't speak, I can't do this. And then God says, you know, don't worry, I will have your brother speak for you. So Aaron became Moses's mouthpiece. Aaron became Moses's spokesperson. Very interesting. So what's his name himself did not speak. Moses did not speak much. He was slow to speak. And we know this is true because there's a very interesting, very interesting incident that took place in the book of Numbers, where Aaron and Miriam, his siblings, were actually quite pissed off over Moses' choice of wife, and they decided to give him grief about it. The Bible isn't very, very clear about exactly what kind of woman she was. There's all sorts of speculations, but they're purely speculation. The point is, she was coming from a different tribe, the Midians, and these people were not happy with this idea, and so they gave Moses a lot of grief, and it must have become a point of contention because God got very, very angry with Miriam and Aaron, and literally reprimanded them very powerfully. It's in scripture. Reprimanded very powerfully and told them they should never do that again. I'm just paraphrasing. And that's an example of how much Moses was such a powerful person, even though he didn't speak much. And the scripture actually says that Moses was the most humble man in those days. In other words, he never spoke. And that's why they took advantage of him, Miriam and Aaron. And it took God himself to step in and say, hey, guys, you should never do such a thing again. I mean, Miriam even got struck with leprosy, and she had to plead with Aaron and Moses so that God could reverse that powerful judgment upon her for her tongue and for her bitter words against the leader. So it's amazing. So my point being, leadership is the product of charismatic personality? Nah, not true. Because you can be the most laid back, quiet person, but be an absolutely amazing leader. So these things about leadership are so amazing. Now, let me run through some very powerful pointers to close our discussion today. And I'm just these are more misconceptions, and there's a whole bunch of them. And I want to kind of run with these as a concluding presentation here today, just to let you know. So let's look at some misconceptions, common ones, real quick. And these misconceptions will help you understand better the challenge that we see today when it comes to the whole idea of why so many people hold on to these things. Now, just before I do that, allow me to run one of our little trailers just about what we do, and then we should be able to continue. So just a moment. Let's take a look at this, and then I'll be back. Then we continue with the position, so the different misconceptions I speak about, which are going to help us understand in a deeper and more powerful way what I'm talking about. Now, I think technically, righty, so we're back. That was a word from our sponsors, as we call it. Now, let me continue, and we build on these misconceptions real quick in the last 7 or so minutes, just to help all of you that are watching get a better idea of what we can do. And I like this comment from Desia. She says you can be a laid-back person and make a powerful leader. It's very true. Very true. And that's why we're saying these are deep misconceptions, and a lot of people have held on to them as if they're true. So let me run some more. Very, very interesting insights you like. Okay, so number one, position determines leadership. Very untrue. A lot of people think if I'm given a position, if I become a boss or a manager, then I can make a great leader. Nonsense. Not true. Leadership is nothing to do with position. It's everything to do with authority. It's everything to do with example. Leadership is from within. And that's why you can have an individual that has no position, but they take leadership. A lot of people tend to get so overwhelmed and they say that's a natural leader. Truth of the matter is that they just have this ability to command and bring insight in a situation that is able to guide others. So position does not determine leadership. People can still be leaders even without a title. Number two, leadership is synonymous with management. Absolutely untrue. You don't have to be a manager in order to be a leader. You can be a leader in spite of not being a manager, because it's about taking initiative and standing and doing what you ought to do when you ought to do it. Number three, leadership cannot be taught. Untrue. That's why there are leadership training colleges, universities, schools, and academies whose aim and goal is to teach people about how to be better leaders. And by so learning, for example, what I'm teaching right now, these are powerful nuggets taught in a number of institutions across the world on leadership. I mean, the most famous I know personally is the John Maxwell Leadership Institute. What does John Maxwell do? He teaches people on leadership. And he basically takes the cream de la cream of individuals that are aiming to be leaders, movers, and shakers in their particular fields and going out there and doing what it takes. Number four, leaders must always be leading. Again, not necessarily. There is leading from the front, I agree. But many times, great leaders are very good at identifying resource persons within their control or within their resource pool, and are able to draw those individuals in and be able to help those individuals become powerful in their own space. So great leaders are not threatened by other individuals that seem to know better than them. If anything, they gravitate towards them and draw them in so that those are able to bring in themselves as a resource as well. I think that is so profound as a mark of leadership. Unfortunately, because of our backgrounds, a lot of people come from a place of scarcity, so they carry the scarcity mindset, and so they are threatened when they see people that look and sound better than themselves. A very unfortunate situation, which should not be the case for a great leader who understands the responsibility that comes with being in that position. Now, now another one, leaders must be extroverted. We've just shown that one can be a super introvert like Moses and still be able to lead. So you don't have to be this charismatic, super talking individual like me to be a leader. No, you can be the most laid back, quiet, hardly speaks a word, reserved type, and still demonstrate great leadership, because it's the ability to get people to move in a particular direction and achieve a particular objective. That's what true leadership is, rather than being able to kind of use to wow people with your charisma. And I admit that that can be a very powerful, overwhelming factor, but it's just not true. Then leaders are bosses or managers. No, they are not. Leaders, in fact, bosses and leaders are miles apart. One of the simplest examples I always use to illustrate this is leaders inspire, bosses threaten. Just remember that. So bosses use force and fear to lead, whereas leaders do not use fear. They inspire. So leaders, that's why somebody can have no position, no authority, and still be able to get people to drop everything to follow what they're doing and what they're saying. That's what true leadership is. That's why leaders are not bosses. So the idea that leaders are bosses or managers, or that they need some kind of position or they need some kind of title, that's nonsense. Leaders don't need titles. Leaders are leaders, and they can lead with no titles. So, to be honest, titles are a bit of what's the word? An ego trip. People are so hung up with titles, especially in Africa. It's a big deal. And so a lot of people want titles, and they kind of into a whole thing about titles. I honestly hate titles. Even this Rev, it's really just to set me apart. But to be honest, Brother Walter is good enough. For anybody who's a fellow in the faith, we're brothers. So Brother Walter is awesome. Walter, if we're in the same age. In Africa, we've got a thing about calling elders by their first name without the va. Especially here in Zambia, we use the va thing. The va prefix, shows that they're senior. So fine, I understand that. That's respect. That's fine. But the titles, major, apostle, bishop, overseer, whatever, general, whatever. I don't know. I know some circles that's the big deal. So they give you all these titles. So you find deacon, elder, then pastor, then I don't know, major pastor, and then senior pastor, and then bishop, and then general overseer, and then in the more charismatic circles, especially the pseudo Pentecostals, they're the ones who really go to the next level. Like they have captain, this is like a powerful captain. Then from there they have a major prophet. Then they have, I don't know, a general prophet. I don't know, seer. I don't know, whatever they have. For me, those titles are just an ego trip, which don't serve anybody anything except just to give them a sense of stroking their egos. For me, Brother Walter is good enough, my brother. I'm a brother, and we're fellow brothers. I'm an elder brother to those that are younger than me, and I've got older brothers that are ahead of me. And that's what we are. We're all just brothers and sisters on a journey. And so titles are not a big deal for leaders. They don't lead by title. And then leaders are not emotional. Very untrue. Leaders can be emotional. Leaders can be all over the place with their emotions. The most important thing really is not that they're emotional or not emotional. It's their ability to control those emotions when it matters. Okay, so the key is when be angry when it's appropriate to be angry, but don't have tantrums, because there are some people who just love tantrums, and I guess that's their thing. But anyway, to be honest, a lot of leaders can be emotional, and it's okay. It's okay. I mean, be emotive in whichever way you think suits you. But for me, I think it's very cardinal, very critical to be very sure that even if you're going to have an emotional tirade, make sure it's done within context and done correctly. Because again, you don't want people to be afraid to approach you and tell you stuff. So always keep an open door. I like the open door policy. I like the open door policy, and I like to encourage people to differ with me. If you go to my social media platforms, I always tell people, if you don't agree with me, tell me. Let's have a conversation. Let's thrash it out. Let's share ideas, and let's see why yours is better than mine. But I'm very big on opening doors to allow people to bring their ideas. And for me, that's very important, because then it allows people to bring their creativity into the picture. Now, leaders are unkind, untrue. Now, I know there are some circles where they believe you must be firm, you must be hard, or bazaku delela, which is a term that means they'll walk all over you. Untrue. Untrue. There's nothing wrong with being kind and being positive. Okay? There's nothing wrong with that. If you can do that and still exhibit a very positive attitude and still manage the process. But I know that in our African setup, there's a fear of being too vulnerable and being too open. People fear maybe they'll take advantage of you. For me, I think that's a wrong view. I think it is good to trust and let people see your vulnerability in terms of being kind to people. Just because one person is unkind or one person takes advantage of your kindness doesn't mean that now you must become a mean SOB. sorry to say that. But no. The idea is that remain positive, remain kind, and always show kindness. Even if people abuse the kindness, it doesn't mean that now you stop helping. No, you learn your lessons, but continue being kind. So leaders are unkind is a very wrong teaching. Leaders are confident all the time. Again, untrue. There's a way in which you can show vulnerability or show inability to understand certain things at certain times and look to others and pass on that responsibility of saying, we're counting on you. I'm counting on you to help us see how best we can navigate this particular situation. It's good to show that sometimes you don't know everything. Now, I know in our culture, again, the leader must seem to know everything. No. Let them know. You know what? I don't know. Guys, we have a situation here, and I need to hear all the ideas from you. Now, there's a way in which you go about getting everybody to understand the situation. But don't, of course, as a leader, don't go there and say, we're doomed, we're finished, I don't know what to do, things are so bad. No, 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 no. And I've watched enough movies where some of, for example, in Lord of the Rings, there's a scene where I think I forgot the name of the place, and they go there, Gondor. I think it's Gondor, and they go there, and the prefect is losing it because he's seeing the hordes of the armies of darkness coming, and he freaks out, and he's like, "Oh, we're all gonna die! Run away, all of you men, go! This is the end!" And Gandalf is nearby, and he says, "There's no way I'm going to allow that." He just goes and literally knocks him out, and he passes out. And after he passes out, they just take over. "Man, to your stations!" And he changes the order. So yes, in that case, that's weakness and it's unacceptable. The key is that you must always give a very strong exterior as a leader, because, and I'm closing with this because the time is gone, because when as a network marketer, we were always taught, and this is stuck. We're always taught that when you're leading people, always ensure that, one, where you have negative events going on, you express those upward. And where you have good events going on, you express those downward. Never go to juniors and give them bad news. Never go to juniors and show that it's finished, you don't know what to do, or things are very bad, or the leaders are terrible, or the whole situation sucks. No. Always give an exterior of confidence. Only when you meet your seniors, that's why you say, "Boss, this is the situation." Then also that senior shouldn't start going, "The situation is really bad, I tell you. We are doomed, we're finished." No, 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 no. As a leader, you must say that, "Okay, yeah, the situation is quite dire, but you know what? There's a way. Let's see what we can do." And my favorite quote, I know, again, movies, Mission Impossible, Tom Cruise, "Do you have a plan? We're working on it." Are you just gonna work? Are you sure this is gonna work? We'll figure it out. And I love that. Yes, because at the end of the day, as a leader, you can't say, "We're doomed, this whole thing won't work." No, you have to keep giving a positive answer, because that's what inspires your people under you to keep running, because they say the boss knows what to do. And you also, you're like, "You know what? We'll work it out. Don't worry. We all trust and believe God. God will come through somewhere. But give your best. Let's run." And you know what? I love that. So don't be one of those who freaks out and panics and everybody now realizes, "Oh, wait, we're doomed. Things are rough." No, no, no. That's not what leaders do. And I'll have to end there. There's still quite a number of them. Leaders are professional and private. Nonsense. You can be professional and you can be public. And it's a very, very good thing sometimes. Of course, you don't have to review everything. But for me, and depending on the field you're in, sometimes being open and vulnerable is a very strong sign of leadership. And then also, leaders know everything. No, we don't. That's why leaders rely on good resource people. It is Bill Gates who said, "The reason we hire people better than ourselves is that they tell us what to do, not the other way around." You hear that? The reason we hire or have people around us that are better than ourselves is that they tell us what to do and not the other way around. So you give the overall vision, and then they come and fit in on the various sections and give their expertise. So great leaders don't do the whole "I know everything" mindset. And then all leaders are extroverted. Not true. Leaders have high energy. Not always true. And leaders are void of mistakes. Not true. We know enough leaders who made mistakes. And for me, this is my closing remark now. For me, I think being able to admit when you go wrong, one of the most powerful leadership traits is a leader who can come back and say, "Hey guys, by the way, last week I know I'd say this and that, and definitely we were off mark. It didn't work, and sorry, I was wrong. I stand corrected." Or John came with an idea 2 weeks ago, and I brushed it off. But you know what? After further reflection, John's idea is the best one. Can we all re-strategize? We're going with John's idea. Great leaders learn how to give credit where it's due. And that's why many people are willing to die for the leaders, because they have demonstrated true selflessness. It's not an ego trip. And a lot of bad leaders are very bad. Yes, all-knowing leaders, absolutely, Desi. That's one of the most terrible traits. A leader should be able to show vulnerability and say, "You know what? That's why we have you here, because we believe you're the best. And you can guide us and show us how to go about making this work." So on that note, ladies and gentlemen, those were some tips. Today, I am presenting on behalf of Dr. Nellie. She wasn't able to be part of the call. A number of you know she's in Nigeria doing her thing there. And we're grateful to have the opportunity. I've been with her and for her to have come through and, giving us this opportunity to come through and present. So my name, Rev Walter Mambazi, and glad to have been here. Those of you that are very interested in all these things know that these are the traits of true leaders, and go demonstrate them in your own space. So on that note, I want to thank you immensely for such a great opportunity. And remember, tomorrow we have our usual slot. Tomorrow is Friday, and on Fridays we have Doc Jackie. She normally comes through and does her slot, which is the what's the slot again? Healthy tips. She comes and gives us insights on health tips and how best we as individuals can be able to do what we need to do in order to progress, in order to be better. So on that note, thank you so very much. Have a great day, and we'll see you soon.